the recording has started, so we can get going. Perfect. So before we get started on the contents, I just wanted to give you a very quick overview of the Energy Communities repository, which is organizing this webinar. As you know, several years ago, the European Commission published definitions for energy communities so that there would be a clear legal framework for energy communities moving forward to help them organize their projects and finance them and this way contribute to the clean energy transition. A little while after that, the European Commission set up an Energy Communities repository, which was meant to establish both a base of information around the topic as member states are transposing the definitions into their national law to help them do this work in a meaningful way and that it really applies to the reality of energy communities, and also to provide data overall and technical assistance to energy communities to help their development. So what we've done over the last 2 years is, here you see a little highlight section. We've set up a map of energy communities. It's the very beginning of a map. The energy communities have been able to add themselves to this map from around mid this year, and we continue to receive submissions and we show them on the map there. So if you're curious about finding out a little bit what kinds of energy communities exist in Europe, you can have a look at the repositories map. There are also some maps at national levels that you can explore that you can find in several organizations at national level. The repository has also undertaken an analysis of the national legal framework, so looking at what member states have already done in the context of energy communities to set up the definitions, to set up the enabling frameworks, and you can find information about that on the repository's policy map on our website. We've also provided technical assistance to energy communities in the form of capacity building workshops, direct technical assistance, twinnings, and also these webinars, which we hope will help energy communities build more knowledge around certain topics that they need to advance their projects. Overall, we have worked with over 150 communities between these different activities that I mentioned over the last 2 years, which has been really, really inspiring and really great to see how much is happening on the ground and the motivation and the perseverance of people in different places around Europe. You can also find impact indicators on energy communities. There's always a question about what do energy communities really do? Like what is the benefit they bring, or maybe the challenges that they also bring to the energy transition and that they encounter. And we've taken the data that we've received from the communities map to look at, to aggregate this data and provide some insights. Now, this is obviously not a full set of data at the moment, but it's a start to hopefully build a meaningful impact assessment over years and efforts to come. So I encourage you to check that out on the repository's website. And then finally, there's a lot of guidance documents available in the repository's toolbox. We've also developed a few guidance documents, particularly on digital tools and how to set up an energy communities one-stop shop. And we'll also be publishing a guidance document on energy sharing by the end of this year. So that's just to give you a little overview in case you were not that familiar with the repository's work so far. I encourage you to check out the different elements on our website if you're curious. I'll send the link later on. But now I would like to hand over to Stan, who's going to be the moderator of today's session and to present to you the program and the speakers.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much, Miriam, for this great introduction. My name is Stanislas Davmont, and I'll be facilitating the panel today. I'm here with 4 great speakers that are going to be showing you programs dedicated to financing energy communities across Europe. Obviously, we chose specific examples, and this is because we want to have a conversation with you in the room. So feel free to, challenge, feel free to question, feel free to take an interest in the presentations that we'll have today. But first and foremost, let me introduce the session that we have. Our aim is to explore the topic of community financing and specifically financing programs dedicated to energy communities. Our target obviously are you in the room, the energy communities that we want to help grow and scale up, both in your activities, but also in your depth, in the type of members that will be taking part in your activities. And the speakers that we have today are each targeting a specific part of both the project development approach and as well as the type of tools, financing tools that would be made available to energy communities. I'll shortly introduce the speakers and then I'll pass it on to you. Please hold your questions until the end of the presentation, as we will have a Q&A and panel session at the end of this webinar. So write down your question in the chat or keep them for the conversation afterwards. I will try to include your question into the conversation with our great speakers, but it's very important, of course, that you make your voice heard in that discussion. So without further ado, let me introduce you the four great speakers that we have today. The first one is Cilou Bertin from Energie Samen. Cilou is a manager at the Energie Samen Academy and has been working with energy communities on capacity building and education in the Netherlands for quite a while now. She has been working on financing schemes at the development stage at the local and regional level for citizen-led energy projects. Our second speaker will be Manuel Nina from GoParity, and GoParity is a community crowdfunding platform. Manuel is the chief commercial officer of this platform. He's a mechanical engineer and has been working on energy communities and cooperatives for quite a while. He's a member of Copernico, the energy cooperatives from Portugal. And after a stint in the European and Portuguese Parliament, he's been joining GoParity to support financing energy communities at the local level. The third speaker is Louise White. She's the coordinator of the ELENA facility, a grant facility from the EIB, the European Investment Bank, and the European Commission that has been active since 2009. The ELENA facility is dedicated to energy efficiency and transport. Louise has joined the EIB already in 2010 and has been working with ELENA since then. And the final speaker for today will be Aurore Boyeldieu, a former lawyer specializing in European law and state aid. And Aurore works with the team at Energie Partagée. Energie Partagée is a financing scheme in France that is dedicated to supporting energy communities develop and specifically working on co-financing. She works as well on the European project ACE that she will be presenting today, analyzing investment tools for energy communities. With this, I will stop now and I'll pass on the floor to Cilou, who will share experience about community financing with us in the Netherlands. Cilou?
Thank you, Stan, and thank you for having me. Good morning, everybody. Let me just share my screen. You should be able to see my screen now. Yes. So first of all, thank you for having me and good morning. And my name is Cilou Bertin. I work at Energie Samen, as Stan said. I've been working there for, I think, a little over 5 years now. And I am going to tell you about how, the funds that we, or financial aid that we have at Energie Samen. So just to give you a quick overview. Let me click here. Yeah, it works. This is, in short, an overview of all the funding and financing schemes that we have in the Netherlands available for cooperatives who are working on energy projects. And you, from the left to the right, you can see the different stages that you go through as you develop your project. So my area of expertise is on the left in the development stage. Then after the development stage goes from, first idea until you get the financing to actually start building your project, start buying windmills and solar panels and stuff. So that's where you also start getting, just before that, we also help you get funding from your members to do that according to all the rules and regulations, which is the blue square that you see. And we also have a fund that helps you in case you are not able to get all the funding from your members that you need. I have to say, though, that the green fund that you see, the credit large projects, until now has never been used because cooperatives have always been able to get the funding. They always don't want to know it's there just in case. And in the yellow box, you can see our realization fund, which is a loan. It's a fund organized by banks that we manage for them and to leverage your equity from your members. My area of expertise, as I said, was the development fund, so development stages. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the coming 10 minutes. To get the development fund, just money alone is not enough. So At this moment, we have a fund for solar and wind, and we got a lot of experience with that, and we experienced that it doesn't, just having money available for cooperatives is not enough. You also need to organize the correct policy so that they have the room and the context to be able to build projects, that first of all, they are allowed and they are even supported if possible. So in the Netherlands, it's actually going quite well. And we also, of course, need the financing to build, but we also need capacity. So people with skills, enough people also, and having knowledge yourself and having people with knowledge. So we see that when we are advocating for more money, whether it's banks or public money, having the total picture of these three elements helps really to give them confidence as we are able to get successful projects. At this moment, we have a development fund for solar wind, but we are also working now on the district heating fund, where we actually worked in both funds. We worked on the whole package for both. So just to show you a little how it works. If you look at the development stage, we split that up in 4 phases, and this you can pull through to until the end of the project when it's built. But as you can see, you start out with actually quite low investments. So, and also because it's usually citizen initiatives, the requirements are also low. The risks are low, the investment or the risks are high in the sense that the project, there's still a big chance it's not going to go through. But the investment is very low. So if you look at the risk and the money you can lose, it's not that much money. So the requirements are very low so that anyone can actually start and apply for a loan. And then once you get to the second phase, you need a little bit more money. The risks are already a lot lower, but also the requirements that you need to fulfill to get that second part of the loan are a lot higher, so that we are sure that you have actually managed the risk from the first phase. And this goes on until the fourth phase. And this actually helps us to give support to the energy communities to get them to the right level. So usually when you go to a bank or any instance, you ask for money and then you get a yes or no if you don't meet the requirements. With Energie Samen, you can actually get the support you need. We help you get there. So just to show a little bit on how we do that. This is actually what I've been saying is specifically true for the development fund, but also actually works for all our funding. It's always combined with the supporting system. And we do that by actually splitting the roles. We always work with an independent financial institution so that we can stay on the left side of this image. We can give the guidance and support. So we are the champion and the supporting system for the energy cooperatives, and we can choose side as say we have a fund controller that we work closely with that actually controls the money and make sure that we are doing the right things so that the risks are managed, that people actually do meet the requirements. They check that for us. But we do design the fund together. So we make sure that the requirements and all the conditions that you have to meet fit the cooperatives in the Netherlands. And in the case of the development fund, there's a donor behind the financial institutions, which is a ministry. So the fund controller can represent the interests of the donor, and we can represent the interests of the EU applicants. Yeah, so basically that's how our funding works. And yeah, that's, if you have any questions, we can move on until later. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cilou, and thank you for this experience of building funding schemes in the Netherlands. I think the growth of the Dutch movement is telling in terms of how successful this funding scheme has been. So thank you very much for sharing your experience. Let's continue with the presentation of Manuel, who will present the experience of GoParity in Portugal. Manuel?
Thank you so much, Stan, and thank you for inviting me to present our work. So GoParity is a daily impact life finance and investment app. So we are operating at European level. So any country in Europe, and this includes the UK, can ask for a loan on GoParity. And we are under supervision of the Securities Commission of Portugal. And we currently have investors from 65 countries. So we started funding only solar panels, but we have since then moved to a lot of areas on sustainability and impact. So how does this work? We have investors, which any of you present in this webinar, for example, can become, starting at €5. Our banking core is actually a French bank. And these people will invest in terms of loans. We are talking about debt to any promoter. And promoters can be organizations, so cooperatives, associations, condominiums, and of course, what we do most of the time as well, SMEs and startups. And these companies will pay back not only the principal, so the capital lent, but also an interest rate aligned with normal market practices. And all of this needs for us to allow this project to run on our platform is to have impact, either environmental, social, etc. As for us, we are the intermediary of this. So we are doing the taking care of thousands of contracts, thousands of monthly payments, so that it's for the one receiving the money, the promoter, it's a very seamless experience, similar to a bank. What we have is a setup fee for the campaign that is charged only on success when we raise the expected loan, and annual administration fee that allows us to keep the machine running and the payments, etc. Some numbers to show you. We have been licensed since 2017. We have at this moment over 41,000 users in the platform. 85% of these are Portuguese, but they are rapidly growing in Spain, Italy, Netherlands, France, and other geographies, as I mentioned. We have raised over 31 million euros for loans, and bear in mind that we're always talking about small projects, especially if we talk about solar. The average ticket will be 100,000 euros. And we have 140 promoters that have received loans from us. So in a nutshell, we work in many areas, but I will focus specifically on sustainable energy, in our case, solar. It's around 41% of our business. And what is also important from our side is the idea of community. So not only the loan itself and the money, but how are these people involved with your project? So, and this is where we have some interesting different aspects that can be used. We can do private campaigns, meaning that we can get you a link translated in your local language. By the way, GoParity is always translated in Portuguese, English, and Spanish. But if we have a private campaign, we can have a page translated in your local language that will only be accessible to a restricted group of supporters, citizens and organizations. This means that even if you have companies or associations or foundations that want to lend money to your energy project, you can do that through GoParity because we accept loans from any organization. So we can do a private campaign where you only make this campaign accessible to a specific number of persons you reach out. Or we can do, for example, a private first campaign, meaning that we give the right of first access to your supporters. And then when we see that we cannot raise more money and you still need a bit more to get to the accepted or the expected value, we then open to our European community of supporters. And finally, we have the standard ones that you can find on our website, goparity.com, which is the public campaign where our 41,000 users are engaged. 2 examples to show you that we have already done with energy communities. One example are the energy services companies that are promoting what is under the Portuguese law an energy community, but all of us here have a very, let's say, clear understanding of the taxonomy. And for my sake, I will call these initiatives collective self-consumption, because they are done and run by a company. So there is no citizen governance here. But we have done that for supporting a company called CleanWatts. They have a program called 100 Villages, where they are putting solar in 100 villages in Portugal. And we have raised over €1 million for them in 15 collective self-consumption systems. And we have, through these projects, involved 3,000 citizens that finance this project. This is one of the first, theoretically, the first collective self-consumption system in Portugal. And what you can see here is in this building, you have 2 solar units, and then in this here, there's a smaller one as well. These are all being shared through all the neighborhood. But I will show you what we sometimes say in GoParity: the smaller is more beautiful, which is a very small renewable energy community. And this is the citizen-led. This is one that we like the most, let's say. And it's the associations of the Friends of Ponteirinhas. Ponteirinhas is a very small village. And what we got was a public campaign with 800 citizen lenders. They raised around almost 69,000 euros. And they installed 4 PV plants, 140 kilowatts, a battery pack for collective self-consumption. Now, the interesting part of this initiative is that when they got to know us, they came for the loan on energy. But then after a few months, maybe 6 or 7 months after they installed the PV panels and the batteries, the citizens, the group of members of the community had got together, and they decided that they also wanted to reactivate an 18th century gravity watering system for some agricultural explorations that was deactivated over the years, and they were using diesel pumps, diesel engines to provide water systems to this region. And so we also funded that under the community energy program, and it has led to cutting off 3,000 liters of diesel consumption per year. So it shows how secondary projects can gain visibility under the logic that citizens get together. And last but not least, one of the things that we're also very interested in, and we hear from our clients, those that ask for loans, is that many times we hit the news. So as we create the campaign with our colleagues that are specialized in marketing, we prepare the PR, but we also reach out to the traditional media and then make it happen. So it means that we get TV interviews, newspapers, radio, and therefore when we work in other geographies, we also try to find local PR partners that can replicate this very interesting effect for community projects. And that's it. You will have my contacts on the presentation, and feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manuel, for this presentation. The tool of GoParity is really bringing this complementarity to what Cilou presented with this semi-institutional approach that Energie Samen has been developing in the Netherlands. Well, now that we went through, I want to say, the private side, let's go full-on institutional and hear from Louise of the ELENA facility. So Louise, what can you tell us about the ELENA facility and the work of the EIB to support energy communities?
Full-on institutional presentation coming up. Let me just share my screen. You can see? Because I can't see you anymore.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So just maybe to give a quick synopsis as well, ELENA is in the EIB, and the EIB is a bank for lending. We are very much dictated by EU policy. And so what this means is that energy efficiency and renewable energy play a large part in what we are financing. The energy efficiency first principle just means that this should be something that's looked at before as part of every project. And normally we can finance up to 50% of a loan, but for energy efficiency, we can go up to 75%. Generally, because energy efficiency projects are smaller and you need more aggregation, we do this through intermediated structures. Renewable energy projects tend to be a little bit bigger. You have a standalone wind farm, for example, or a big PV plant, and they would be more suited to the direct lending. I mentioned this purely to in the context of energy communities, because I think that this has a lot of the aspects that you see in energy communities, albeit at a smaller scale in some cases, but nevertheless, the principles are also very aligned. So as one of the previous speakers also mentioned, though, financing is generally not the only thing that's needed. So the bank has the capacity to finance these projects, but generally the issue is to find projects that are at the right stage and also scale. So when we look at then the technical assistance offering in the bank, and my slides aren't working, here we go. If we look at the technical assistance offering in the back, we just, if you could look at the top part of the slide, you can go from very upstream support that's needed, because the policy framework and the legal framework is always super important, so that you have the basics there. Then you move into the preparation stage so that you have all of the right tools and people that can prepare your project. And then, of course, there's also support needed during implementation in lots of cases. So the facility I will talk about now, ELENA, is firmly in that middle phase there. It's the preparation. So this is a program set up between the Commission and the EIB to facilitate preparation of sustainable investment projects. And this is where I think there's the most scope as well for the energy communities to come in, because I think that could be part of one of these projects. So here, just for people who don't know what it is, you've also mentioned it in your introduction, European Local Energy Assistance. Just think of it as a pot of money to help prepare projects. The focus is on preparing energy efficiency and sustainable transport projects. It's a facility that's been run since 2009, and it is the Commission funds, and the bank is managing it on behalf of the Commission. So to date, we have about 166 projects right across the EU. Some of them have have energy communities as part of their focus, but there's no one project that's solely energy communities, and I think that's also to do with the scale. We are looking really at projects that are over 30 million euros at least in investments at the end of a 3 to 4 year period. Nevertheless, we are definitely seeing more interest in setting up energy communities, particularly in the residential sector. So I'll give you an example of that as well. ELENA is, as I said, supporting sustainable investment, and we have 3 main envelopes. And I think the first 2 would be of most interest to the audience of energy communities. So the first is an envelope for energy efficiency, and this is generally focused on buildings, so public and private buildings, schools, hospital, offices, commercial buildings. Doesn't matter what the building is, as long as there's real energy savings that can result from the investments. This envelope can also support district heating projects and street lighting projects. The second envelope is more dedicated to the residential sector. Again, this is on buildings, so it doesn't actually matter what type of building, public, private, social housing, single family homes. As long as it's the residential sector, this pot of money can help prepare those. And the final envelope is for transport, where we're generally looking at supporting the integration of new types of sustainable vehicles into a public fleet. And we're also seeing a lot more applications now that have alternative fuels such as hydrogen in their targets. Alongside that, you also have the the IT and digital tools that are needed to integrate these types of, more seamless public transport to get people out of their individual cars and into, a seamless bus from your bike to your tram to your train, and you can use the one ticket. There's a lot of IT that goes behind all of that, and so projects are also using ELENA support to help them prepare all of that. So that just gives you a general overview of the types of investment programs that ELENA is supporting. The yellow numbers underneath are to do with what we call a leverage factor, and this is the link between the grant and investment. So for energy efficiency, for every €1 of grant, there has to be at least 20 million euros of investment. And for residential and transport, every €1 million of grant has to be linked to at least 10 million euro of investment. So this is again the I suppose the one of the features of this project, of this program, in that it's a grant that has to result in real projects on the ground. Oops. So how do you get ELENA? Well, there are no calls, so it's continuously open, and how it would work can generally be divided into, I think, 3 main stages. So the first is that you just come to talk to us at the EIB, and there's a special dedicated ELENA team. There's a mailbox. Generally, we get queries through the mailbox or through attendance at events, and we just have a phone call and a bit of back and forth to ensure that the application is something that looks viable for ELENA, so that you have all of the right types of eligibility, you have all of the right types of scale, and what you want to do looks feasible in a 3 to 4 year period. Then we really work with you to develop something that can be sent to the Commission for approval. And that's not just filling in the application form. Yes, we are an institution and we do insist that you have to fill in the forms. There's no getting beyond that. But what's important is that this phase is helping you, the project, sit down with all the main stakeholders so that you know who the decision makers are, what you need to prepare these investments, what you have internally in your organization and who can work on it, what you are missing externally, and what sort of advice you need to get in. And then we're looking at, do you have the right team, and does this match the type of program that you are trying to invest in? So for energy efficiency in buildings, street lighting, district heating, transport, residential sector, yes, they're all energy efficiency, but they require different skill sets. And depending on where you are, depending on what sort of an organization you are, depending on the legal framework in your country, the ESCO market in your country, etc., you will be at different stages and you will require different things. So this is what we go through in the application stage. And then once we agree on that, the EIB will submit this request for a grant to the Commission. And once the Commission will approve this, you can start your ELENA project. So what do I mean by starting? The grant essentially will fund 90% of your project development costs. So as I've just mentioned, this will depend on what it is you're trying to prepare, but generally it consists of a focused ELENA team that will be made up of your internal staff. So it's very important, I think, to have these people involved. They know the background, they know the project, they know who's who. So you can dedicate some of those part-time or full-time to prepare this project. But then you can also get in the expertise. And these are the short-term experts that you are not necessarily having in your own organization, but that are needed to prepare the program. Most of the time for energy efficiency, you have experts coming in to do some type of energy assessments or audits. You also have legal people to develop contracts, help with legal frameworks. You also have tender procurement experts. You may have some of that internally, but a lot of the time procurement in itself is a very specialized topic. So you can also get some support with that. Even some support to apply for the grants that may be in your country, because we have a massive chunk of money right across the EU with structural funds and RRF, etc. But it's a whole process in order to get that as well. So you set up your team and you try to make sure that it has everything from the technical, legal and financial expertise that you need to do. And this is where I think as well you can see some of the projects are using these people to focus on the aspects relevant for energy communities. Because in often cases, you do have the legal framework there, but then it's the nitty-gritty about how this is actually organized seems to be what still requires work. So, you know, how you will share your energy in a particular building, even at a, you know, building level, how you are paid, the role of the DSO, the distribution system operator as well. All of these things require time, and they also require work to build up the, you know, a legal framework so that you have something solid to invest in. I've already mentioned this, but this is just to show you where ELENA is right across the EU. Currently, there's about 290 million euro of grant that's been given or ongoing, and it's supporting over 9.5 billion euros of investment right across the EU. So I know these are very big numbers when you compare it to maybe individual projects, but this is just to show, I mean, this is everything. Some of these are big, massive tenders for street lighting your buildings, but in that figure, you could also have some potential for smaller energy community projects. And we actually would really like to see more of them as well, because the whole idea of ELENA is that you are trying to use one aggregator to build up projects at the local level. And this is where you could see energy communities have a real impact. Looking at one just project, and then I finish. One project at the moment, it's ongoing in Denmark, and it's a social housing project in the residential sector. So the types of projects that they're trying to do are relatively standard, in that we're looking at energy efficiency in the apartment blocks, as well as looking to put PV on the roofs. However, they would also like to involve some local partners and set up an energy community as they are doing this whole renovation. And the idea is that you do have the legal structure existing in Denmark, but a lot of the time, if you have shared PV in an apartment block, you're looking at the common areas. So here what they want to do is involve the consumption of all the tenants in the block. They're not doing it right across the board. They have like a pilot project as part of their ELENA, and they are looking at how they can set this whole structure up so that they can get a pilot working and then hopefully roll it out after ELENA has completed. So here they're really looking at setting up the energy communities in a subset of the social housing units so that they have something that can be used by all of the tenants in the buildings. And they are also then aiming that with this legal framework, you know, that you have a solid contract in front of you, that they can get local investors to also invest in this structure. So this is one of the examples that's currently ongoing in ELENA, and if you wanted to see more about it, there's always an ongoing fact sheet of all the ELENA projects on the EIB website, and there's also a name, so you can also contact projects individually, because I think when projects speak to each other as well, it's also more fruitful. You know what you want to find out, and you can get some real experience on the ground. So that is ELENA in a nutshell. Here are just the website links, etc., and you can contact us for first discussion. We always have a preliminary application form on the website. This is that first stage I was talking about, so that it's always helpful if you can put something down on paper, so you can give us an idea of what it is you would like to do and how you think ELENA can help, and that can be the basis of a first conversation, so that we can then discuss in more detail. So that is it for me, and I stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Louise, and thank you for this great presentation. ELENA is definitely on the forefront of public programs to support energy communities, and it's really about bridging that gap between smaller projects on the ground, the bundling approach, and then, you know, large financing programs that we see happening at the EU level. Speaking of which, our final speaker, Aurore, is going to tell us about the experience of Energie Partagée around co-development, which is really that, right? Aurore, it's about getting community participation into larger industrial projects and really creating a partnership with local stakeholders to build those projects.
Yes, at least that is the French experience. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Stan and Miriam, for having me. I will quickly share my screen. Yeah. Oop, there you go. Okay, so without further ado, a few words on the ACE project that Énergie Partagée is a member of, and also Energie Samen. So the idea of the ACE project is to involve partners that have experience in financing energy communities and to share that experience with energy cooperative across Europe. So we have members such as Énergie Partagée and Energie Samen, which we heard from earlier today. And we share our experience with cooperative, and the idea is to help those cooperative create their own energy financing tools in their own countries. So you can see here Énergie Partagée in France and Energie Samen in the Netherlands, sharing experience with several countries. So a few words on Énergie Partagée. So Énergie Partagée is an example of a financing tools which is dedicated to financing energy production projects that involves energy cooperative. So our model works with investment from French citizen. Those citizens become shareholders of Énergie Partagée. And today we've more than 7,000 shareholders, and we've raised over 30 million euros in total since we've started in 2010. And this money is then invested in the shares of energy production projects over France. And we finance the development phase, so all the studies up to getting your project permit, and also the construction phase. Today, we've supported over 100 projects across France, covering all technologies: wind, solar, hydro, and biomass. So the way that it works is that we have, let's say, that pot of money, and that money is managed by a team that is located in a separate cooperative. So we're a team of 10, and what we do is when we get an investment requirement from a cooperative or from a local actor, we will screen that request, and we will also then when we invest in that project, we will be a shareholder, so we will be able to represent the citizen in that project, but also to give advice to the project leaders, so our co-shareholders. So then when the project is on the ground and it's accessing the grid and selling energy, the sale of energy is then sent back to us because we're shareholders of the projects. And then we pay our running cost, and we send back this money to our investor, and we get them a profit of approximately 4% per year. And the idea is that it's a long-term investment. So we tell this sort of our investment because we think the project take a long time to get off the ground. So we are very passionate investors that are ready to just stay on the long term. Obviously, it's not a requirement, but it's our policy. So to give you more details on how we work at the development phase. So to finance the risky development stage of a project, so before the project gets a permit, to finance all of the studies, access to the grid, and so on, we have we try to partner with other partners, other actors, sorry. So we partner with private developers, but we also partner with local authorities that invest directly in the project, or also through their local investment vehicle, which is something that's quite specific to France, but this is how local authorities tend to invest in production projects. So all of these actors become co-shareholders in the project, or in the project company. So everyone invests in equity and takes a share of equity. And this allows to raise money through shareholder loans. So everyone that's a shareholder has a piece of equity of the project company that will finance the project. And that equity allows the shareholders to give loans to that company and to raise the money that is necessary for financing the risky phase of the development. And this allows to finance risky development phase where mostly it's private actors that are ready to take that risk, but also to reach larger projects such as larger PV projects and wind projects. But the system also allows to give access to governance for citizens. So this allowed the citizens to have a real voice in the projects. So citizens are represented directly, as you can see on the right. In most of the projects, there's cooperatives that are represented, but also indirectly via the investment of Énergie Partagée, but also via the investment of their local authorities, local municipalities, or local counties. So we think that all of these actors represent the citizens' voice and local voice in the projects. And this is a really good thing because it helps to have a really good balance between private, citizen, and local voice in the project. And the role of Énergie Partagée here is to be an investor, but also to be seen as a trusted first party from all sides. We try to really help citizens, the private sector, and local actors work together, and just really make that project team work together. And what a really good thing about having local actors and citizens being shareholders of the projects is that it's also a source of funding for local actors. The money really goes back to those local actors. Once the project is off the ground, local actors tends to, after the development phase, once the project has access to grid, to keep being shareholders in the project. And so not only they have made the key decisions at the development phase, but also on the long term, they get money from that project. So they're very invested in the project. So in order for this to work, we have set up an internal label to make sure that we're very clear on the requirements of our investments to our private and public counterparts. And this is the key safeguard to avoid corporate capture from private partner. So every time we invest in project, we make sure that we screen that project using that internal label. So the internal label is 4 key elements. I won't detail them today. I just want to give you a quick overview. So the main key elements of our label is the territorial interest, which is on the top of this drawing here. So we really want citizens to be involved in the government. So we'll make sure that 40% of the shares of that project are owned by citizens, either directly or indirectly, so that you have a 40% citizen voice in the project. And we also make sure that you have a financial participation of also local residents. And we also want to make sure that the projects allow for financing the training of those local actors, and this is something we really want to support local energy cooperative, but also local authorities to gain knowledge, and the project should finance this. The second big key element is shared governance. So if you go round the clock, it's the blue arrow here. The shared governance is to make sure that not only you have access to governance, but also the structural decisions, the very key decisions of the project are all governed by a qualified majority. So essentially, the citizen has a veto on all of those very key decisions. And also we want a full transparency on the decision making and the link between maybe private actors and the companies that are hired to work on the project. This is very important to us. And then we also have 3 other elements. The third in orange here is the fact that we want responsible finance. We don't want very predatory investment from our private partners. We want citizens to be accessing the capital. Our 4th key element is ecology. So we're really making sure that the environmental impact is limited, and this is really taken care of. And then the 5th element is local dynamics. So we're trying to make sure that the companies that are working on the project are as local as possible. And also we want to be able to involve a local cooperative that are investing in the project, or local association to work on the project. So for example, we will try to make sure that if we need awareness raising on the project, this is done through a local association that will take care of that side of the project, especially for wind projects. The contact between the local population and the project is really taken care by local citizens via local association. Yeah.
Should we
wrap it up? Yeah,
yes.
Sorry, I was done there. So thank you, and sorry for being slightly too long.
Absolutely not. It was great. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
With this, I'll call back all the speakers to come back onto the floor. Thank you all very, very much for your great presentations. I feel like there is just a lot of things that were said, and that really represents the diversity of energy communities projects, right? This is from very tiny PV, ground-mounted PV or collective self-consumption projects all the way up to district heating. We heard about energy efficiency, building renovation, large industrial projects like Aurore was talking about. So really the diversity is far and wide, and that explains as well that the tools that you all presented also targeting different types and different stages of projects. We have about 40 minutes to talk together and of course to answer to the questions of the audience. So please audience members, if you have questions, if you have comments, put them in the chat so we can try to address them with the speakers. We thought of having a little bit of structure in our conversation together. The first topic that I would like to tackle with you guys is kind of experience from the ground. So one thing that came back in many of your presentations is this idea that financing is not enough. And the fact that there is a need for more than just, a euro. It needs to be about capacity building. It needs to be about community organizing. And I'm curious to hear concretely why. Is it because of the cultural clash between the financing world and the world of energy communities? Is it because of the size? Is it because of the professionalization? I'm curious to know what are the kind of common barriers that you see from your beneficiaries. And Cilou, I see you nodding. Maybe you want to go first.
Thanks. Yeah, for the Netherlands, what we strongly believe in is that these cooperative projects need to be accessible by anyone. So we see a couple of initiatives that are already very professional. But they are usually also the ones that don't need the money. So we want to also during the development phase, since especially like these larger scale projects can take up to 5 to 7 years just for the development stage, that to give the initiative also the time to develop their organization. And these are people, commercial developers, they do this regularly, so they know what they're doing. They have professional people. Local initiatives are probably not going to do this every year. They are going to do maybe a few smaller solar projects if they're lucky. In the Netherlands, also a larger wind project, maybe some district heating, but they're not going to be doing this, as a business for the for a longer period of time. So that means that they probably do not have the skills yet what you would expect from a commercial developer. So that's why, combined with the accessibility question, we really need to help them to make sure that also to make sure that the investment is safe, but also know that these are our citizens that might have a part of the skill set, but not to make that a criteria. If you start, you have to be able to learn. You don't have to have all the skills already in your team. And we see a lot of diversity in the different teams, especially if you want to make it accessible for example, neighborhoods where there is not a lot of income, where not everybody has a high education, then this becomes especially important.
Interesting. So it's both about this accessibility approach and the fact that there is a need for professionalization. I'm curious, Aurore, if from your point of view, I mean, you're dealing with collectives that are in consortia with large industrial partners, right? Those developers that Cilou was talking about. Do you see the same thing happening? So the fact that there is a learning curve, which is rather steep, how do you guys manage that from Énergie Partagée's point of view?
I mean, yes, of course. Well, I think that, I mean, we have some cooperative in Brittany that have, because in the West, people are very strong-minded. They develop projects on their own, and it's very impressive. But most cooperative will start with smaller projects, smaller PV projects, and then they just learn on the way. So I didn't talk about it today because, I only had 10 minutes, but we also have an association at Energie Partagée that really helps. It's government funded, and we have people that really take care of the training of citizens, and also, what is very important is the share of experience, because as Cilou said, you only do a few projects, so you really need the experience from other cooperatives on the ground that have done projects. So that is the first thing. And the second thing, I think, for us is that that's the reason why having several shareholders in the project and having Énergie Partagée as a partner is helpful at the beginning to have that conversation with developers, because we have a team of people that are used to it. Although we sometimes have people in cooperative that have a professional background, which helps them to have that negotiation. But most of the time, having us as a third party is a good thing, at least as a starting thing for cooperative to get on board and start learning, and then we can. What we do most of the time is that we reduce our share over the time of the projects when the cooperative is stronger, and also when they've raised more money to have more shares. And also, I think a last thing is that the development phase is, of course, very risky. So that's the reason why you need to partner, in our view, with other partners, is to dilute their risk. And to make sure that you're there at the development phase to make those key decisions and have the citizens' voice early on. I don't know if that answered your question. It's a very long answer. Sorry.
You went actually much further than the question itself.
All right, sorry about
love
that.
it. I think it's really that network approach, but also and it's great because that drives me to then ask the question to Manuel. I mean, this diluting of the risk, this mitigation of the risk. I mean, if we put together what Cilou said about accessibility and the fact that we do need to dilute the risk. I mean, Manuel, your experience is really smaller project, deeply rooted in communities. How do you manage that from outside investors, really? Because the investors on your platform are not necessarily only investors from the community. How do you see yourself acting as this intermediary, to dilute the risk? How does that work for you?
So one interesting point here is that we have 41,000 users so investing, and so there are different categories here of people. So sometimes what we would see is that the big investors, that the ones that do this and have portfolios of several €100,000 are not going for these projects, but we're seeing citizens, even if they don't know the community, but they don't mind putting 50, 100, 200 euros in a project just to make it happen. And so in that sense, we are seeing this emergence of a community of investors that just want to see this kind of projects happen. And of course, they're interested in the interest rate that they're going to get, but they're not that worried if they lose their capital or if the project has some hiccup, which hasn't happened yet, but could happen. And in a way, many people that want to see this happening, investing a little bit of money, but if you have 300, 500, or even 5,000 investors, they ended up putting the money that you need. So in that sense, it's almost a European club that is showing up of people, of citizens that just like to bet on these projects. And from our side, the only thing we're going to do is when we look at the assessment of the request. So what's the composition of the community? Many times what we see is you can have a very interesting mix that de-risks the operation. For example, what we see is that sometimes in the energy community, you might have, for example, families in energy poverty or energy vulnerability, but you also have a charity, a local charity that will want to put PV on their roof. And so as they are together in this project, this helps de-risking the operation in the sense of the perceived risk. And the other way to de-risk is the more traditional one, is the more equity a project comes up in their side, let's say the less risk you will have when you put the debt in. So in that sense, I think there are these three angles which facilitate the de-risking of the operations.
Right. I'm curious to bounce back on something that you said about, involving different actors. And Louise here, I mean, you mentioned in your presentation intermediaries and the experience of ELENA working with intermediaries to reach down to projects and the bundling approach. How do you see this conversation about accessibility coming into those intermediaries? Is it something that is part of the conversation that you're having with them? How do you somehow ensure the impact on the ground, right? Being that ELENA is a grant.
Yeah, so I mean, this is definitely something that would be discussed in detail during the application phase, and I think the issues that we would see with energy communities just for the ELENA mandate would be, first of all, and your previous speakers have also mentioned it, there's a lot of upstream work that needs to happen on the ground first. So you need training, you need workshops, you need just people to even know what is an energy community and why they should get involved, what are the benefits. And that's all very, very useful work, but not something that we as ELENA can directly support because it has to have this always linked to the investment. So of course you can have a little bit as you start the program, but I think there's more that would need to be done before they would even come. And it's important work, and that should be something that's also considered and that is necessary, because we need to support projects that are at certain scale. I'm not saying ELENA is the only way to do that, but just that's the barriers we see to we have a lot of requests coming in. Oh, well, I have a project here and I want ELENA support, and it's a very, very, very nice project, but we can only do that when they're at a certain level. So I think that that's maybe one issue for ELENA. However, there is still a possibility to support energy communities through the projects, albeit more at the the smaller pilot scale. And that's why I showed the Danish example, because I think when you're talking about residential tenants, you're talking about individuals, and this is where you can see the right people are being involved in this program, and this is where you have then the potential to set up something more than just renovating the buildings and putting PV on the roofs. So during the application, we would also try to assess what would be the potential, who would be the members of this energy community, and who would be the developers, who's going to be the investors, what sort of structures do they need to set up in order for this to happen. And it would be very, very nice to have an energy community as a direct beneficiary of ELENA. But again, one of the issues that we can have is like, who will sign the ELENA contract? You need an entity to do that. So you need someone to take the ownership and the responsibility of that as well. And that's why it's very interesting to see all these developments on the ground, because I do see that it's really shifting over the last few years. You're getting now much more concrete examples of how this can work on the ground. And I think that that's where something like ELENA or other programs could come in to bring it the step further, because ultimately if you go to a bank or you go looking for financing, they really want to see something concrete. They want to see the payback. They want to see how this is all set up. And this is where the technical assistance facilities can come in, because as you were saying, there's the two types. There's the commercial guys who are used to doing it, but for the local community levels, they don't know where to start a lot of the time, even though they would be in a very good place to do something like this. So support for those entities, I think, is also very important in order to push these things forward.
Absolutely. So that's really what you see as an important part, right? Getting the right professional tools on the ground, and that's where ELENA is really coming in to then get the financing concept, or really then the bank loans right after that. I'm curious, in your experience, Louise, what are the key things that you see being developed through the ELENA facility, through the ELENA support? What are the things that maybe beneficiaries didn't think about to start with, but then through your support, they can actually get those main things together? What are the, to be very concrete and practical here?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time it's very simple things, because you want to set up an energy community. You go to someone's house and you say, well, I want you to be part of this. They want to know, well, what can you do for me? What's my benefit? So even those energy assessments at the start are very useful, because you say, well, okay, you could put so much of kilowatts on this roof or on the roofs of the community. We can produce it at this price. Even if you don't have a structure of selling it for very much money, you can still become how would you say it? I think there's much more scope at the moment for people to become carbon neutral themselves. So even though they're not going to make a lot of money out of it, they have that benefit of saying, well, we can be part of something that's producing the energy, that's clean energy. And this is now something I think that's getting much more traction as well at the local level. So the ELENA projects generally will have some element of these technical studies, but also the legal and regulatory framework as well. Like, what does that mean to a project on the ground? What piece of paper do I need to sign? What are the benefits? And this is really important for the investors, because if you want a local guy to come in, I mean, at the smaller level, fair enough, but I think people still want to know that there's something solid there. And if you want that at scale, that a lot of the ELENA team would also be spent on the legal contract work and developing. Sometimes it's not necessarily just about developing the contract. There might be something there, but being able to make sure it's solid and stand over it and be able to explain it. And this is where, say, the workshop things would come in under ELENA. So when I'm talking about that upstream work, I think there's a lot to be done before you come to ELENA. But then during the ELENA process, for sure, if you have the community that's actually going to be involved, like the social housing unit, then you need people to go, not just once and not someone from Luxembourg. You need someone local to go and to talk to them, explain what this means, and not just once, a few times, materials, be there for questions, like really get people used to it. So they're the types of, say, practical activities that could be directly linked to the end investment, and that would be under, say, the ELENA projects at the smaller level.
Interesting. So it's both the financing of this kind of very social activities and at the same time the very technical standing over it, right? The building something strong. I was about to get to you, Cilou, because I saw a question specifically about district heating.
Quick check.
Sorry?
Yeah, exactly. There's 2 questions in the chat. I don't know if you can see them from participants.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes. Thanks, Miriam. Yeah, we can. I was about actually to ask the question about district heating to Cilou, because I think that's exactly to build on what Louise said, but for the PV, for the rooftop PV, how would you see that? I mean, you guys are working on district heating and cooling right now in the Netherlands, and specifically the process that Louise is talking about is obviously getting done right now by you guys in the Netherlands. But the question is then the intensity of that effort is extremely high. So the question is, what is the main difference? Is it an investment barrier that is missing right now? Is it just the amount of effort simply that needs to happen?
There's a couple of things. Just to start with solar and wind, we have, like, in cooperatives in the Netherlands, we have like about 30 years experience. So the way the project development goes is already a standard development process, so we know what the requirements are, at what level, what the costs are going to be for these projects, we also work with the no cure, no pay, with a risk fee or a success fee, you might call. So if the project doesn't work, the loan is written off, and if the project is successful and you start to build, then you repay us with a success fee, and that fee is an amount that can cover all the projects that have failed, but it's still affordable because we have a high success rate. With district heating, we don't have that experience. So we don't know exactly what the costs are going to be. We look a lot to Denmark, what's going on there. So that's part of the difference, but also there's a lot more barriers. There's a lot more legal barriers in what citizens are allowed to do. In heating and electricity have different laws, so different regulations. And in both, it's very difficult to sell to citizens. Of course, they have to be well protected. But also you see that so there are more barriers there that are being tackled at this moment. So that's also an issue. And we don't know exactly what the consequences are of these barriers in terms of money and risk. So we started now that the new fund that is going to launch soon, I think. I think we just got confirmation that it's gonna open soon. We're starting with a pilot where the success fee is 0%. So you repay the loan if you're successful, but there's no additional fee because we don't know yet what the risks are. So we don't want to put that responsibility on the collective, on the initiatives. And also one of the barriers that we found for district heating that we are curious to find out if it's going to be solved in the next few years is, for example, that at the financing at a later stage, these projects are usually return on investment after 30 years, whereas in solar and wind, usually it's 15, and banks are able to fund for 15 years. But 30 years, they don't want to do yet. So we now have one bank that is looking at making exceptions for district heating projects. So this is also that part, after the development phase, you also need to know that funding is available. So all that together makes that we are doing one big experiment that we don't know exactly is going to work. But we know that if we don't do anything, it's not going to work. And everybody wants this to happen. Government wants this, and commercial parties want to cooperate with citizens because they also believe, like Aurore already said, that the combination works well. And of course, the amount of money needed is a lot more. For example, the maximum loan for wind and for any electricity or solar or wind project is about $500,000 for development phase only. So do that times 20, you have an assessment on the total project costs. For district heating, we are taking into account an average, so not maximum, but average of 1 million per project. So that's a lot more money and a lot. We're expecting them to take longer, but we don't know yet. So those are the largest differences at this moment. Mostly lack of experience.
And that also is a problem. I'm curious because I want to touch on something that you mentioned, which is the fact that there is a lack of diversification of the type of euros, right? It's very difficult to get then this bank financing on the back of the development stage. And there is a question in the chat about that specifically, not about the larger part, but about the smaller part, right? The development cost for very small projects that maybe have a stable yet not extremely financially profitable business model. And there, I want to turn to you because you guys are, you're investors. That's what you do. So how do you see your role in terms of diversifying, the euros available for community energy projects?
You mean like the different types of investors, or?
Yes, the different types, but also the different types at different stages as well, because you guys mostly intervene at the development stage, right?
We started at the construction. We were mostly investing at the construction stage. So 90% of our fund goes to construction. We only have 10% that goes to development. So, that doesn't really answer your questions, I think, but we have we were really, and this is something that we've done quite recently. We have someone that joined the team to support us on analyzing our risk across our portfolio of projects. This is something that we're trying to make sure that we are on top of at the moment. This is something we've always done, but we want to really get stronger on that. To diversify the euros, I think that from our experience anyway, what's important is to have good knowledge on the ground of the local actors, the political play, to be able to get local authorities on board. In France, we have local authorities investment vehicle. And what we've recently done is to partner with them to get them to invest in project as well as us, and as well as private developers. So I think essentially partnership is important. Partnership with developers. I think that's what we try to do. We don't really have contracts of partnership with them, but we have understanding of, they know our label, they know what it is to work with us, and we try and maintain that partnership with developers and with local authorities, so that you have a diversification of investment at development stage, but also at construction stage. Yeah.
Great. Thanks
I'm just
a lot.
thinking as well, if you're saying 10% goes for development and the rest for construction, you should keep in mind something like ELENA, because ELENA exactly comes in where maybe you don't want to. And it would be just to keep it in mind to see if something would come up, because I think the rest of the panel are much more into what's happening on the ground, the much more interesting part. Whereas if you see something like ELENA, it's more to try to get you there. So again, even if something is not happening now, we should keep it in mind, because yeah, there could be some scope for cooperation there. There was just another a question in the chat there while I think of it, because it mentioned ELENA, about a smaller scale ELENA happening. So for now, there's no smaller scale ELENA as such. There's only the central one run from the bank. However, there is SENIA. They do very similar support to ELENA, albeit at a smaller scale, and you apply to that through the calls that this agency under DG Ener will publish every so often, very regularly. I mean, and then we're talking much more at the 1 to 7 million type of scale, and it can be a very useful program as well for doing exactly the type of activities that I mentioned, but just at a smaller scale. But just also to mention that now the Commission is really pushing for member states to set up what we call national ELENA or regional ELENA, and that would be member states themselves using their own funds to set up ELENA. And then the EIB can support them in that process. Some countries are already quite well developed, so they wouldn't need so much. But this is where energy communities could really have an opportunity, because then the 30 million euro would be a very much, that's imposed by us. You might be able to support projects at a much smaller scale and have a bit more flexibility in the eligibility as well, depending on where the funds were coming from. So there's nothing concrete I can tell you now, but I definitely know that this is something that's happening right across the EU and that the Commission is pushing.
Fantastic. So there is ways, let's say, that this is going to get better. That's
better for you.
Exactly. I'm curious as well to continue on that conversation. We mentioned a lot of different financing products, right? That you guys are all offering, maybe grants, maybe loans, convertible products, equity in certain regards. Manuel, I'm curious to know, why did you guys chose the loan as the preferred tool? Why not simply invest in equity, for example? Or, did you look into diverse type of products that might be useful for energy communities?
So in that sense, when we started, the question of equity was, to raise a community that steadily and consistently invests in equity, it's very low. So as we are now, we have already raised near 31 million euros for loans, while if we had chosen only equity, it would be much smaller amount. So in that sense, as a business model, a platform like ours has to focus on loans. And now with the European directive on crowdlending being transposed just last month, it will be possible for us to move into the equity space as well in the future. We don't expect to do it next year, but maybe in 2025 we will move towards equity. The question with equity is also very related to the way you structure this in terms of the holders of the equity, the funds. It has a degree of complexity that it's not very friendly in terms of platforms. So in that sense, that's why we have never went that way. At the same time, let's say for Mediterranean and let's say south of France, north of Italy kind of geographies, when we talk about solar, you have paybacks of around 5 years. So you can think of loans even with longer maturities, up to 10 years, and you will have a business case for whoever is installing them. So in that sense, it's a viable solution for solar projects.
Right. I recognize what you're saying, Manuel, in terms of the complexity of equity and how it ties into ownership and governance. I'm curious, all because you presented La Boussole, which is the tool by which you are actually assessing community energy projects to know if they are stable in governance and really including citizens. You mentioned 40% as a share of citizen ownership and participation. What does that mean concretely for you, this ownership? How does it express itself? And what are the diversities of way as well that it expressed itself?
Yes, well, so our equity investment in projects is actually pure equity is quite small. So we will have projects which have like, for example, 5,000 euros in equity. So then that allows a quite small cooperative to join in, and then we will raise the money through shareholder loans. So most of the money, you are a shareholder, you've got your equity, and then you can give a loan to the company. It's considered equity, but it's not pure equity. So this equity allows to have, so you're buying share of the company really, and then it allows you to vote as a shareholder. So we have different types of organization. So for example, if you have 4 shareholders, then you can just have everyone voting on the company decisions. If you have several shareholders, for example, you have a municipality, you have a cooperative, you have us, you have the private developers. Sometimes if it's too many people, we organize the voting in what we call colleges. So you have the citizen college that has a voice in the say of the project. So it depends on the project, and it's a negotiation that you have to have with your partners, and that's why sometimes it's important to have us in a shareholder so that we are able to negotiate that. We developed a tool internally, which is a term sheet of the article of association, which helps our members to negotiate when they're creating the company. So that has been a really good tool, which we share to our members, to the cooperative or to the local authorities that are shareholders.
Great. I'm curious, Cilou, because in your presentation you mentioned the fact that you are right between private euros, right, banks or investors, and then euros from the local community, and then also public euros, correct? How do you see all of those organizing themselves to kind of preserve this community governance that we are talking about here?
Well, the Energie Samen has specifically chosen to give loans as well, to don't have equity, and that is also to make sure that the community, the energy community or the cooperative, has the ownership. So what you see actually is, and maybe that's a thing that's specific for the Netherlands, but for the risky development phase, we weren't able to get bank loans, so that's public money, because also citizens are also, what we see is that cooperatives are feel too responsible to ask for their members to take that risk. So they have to do so, because there is as you know, with public funding, you also need to give your own share. You can fund up to 70% of the project, so 30% has to come from the members or from the applicants, but they can fill it in with ours. And then for the equity part, it's at least the part of local ownership. There we give support. So actually our role as Energie Samen is to give support so that the cooperatives can do it themselves as much as possible. And there's pros and cons. And thinking about this, I think it's also part of maybe the Dutch culture that I think that there are a couple of schemes that we see where, especially public funds in provinces where the province, so the basically the region, is doing the funding. It also takes equity, that the cooperatives do not want to accept that loan because they don't want someone else in their project deciding with them, even if it's a minor share. So, and it also fits with the policy of, as you might know, in the Netherlands, we have this goal of 50% local ownership of all large-scale production on land. So if that's why we also want to give as much of the ownership to the local cooperatives. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Okay. Manuel, you wanted to react.
Yeah.
Yes, I actually remembered something related to equity as well, which is actually, at least under the what we've done this already in Portugal, and we could study this for other regulations of other nations, is that for cooperatives and for cooperatives alone, we can offer convertible debt, meaning that we can provide. This has to do with registry laws. In Portugal, cooperative registry laws are managed by the cooperatives. So in that sense, we can provide loans that after a specific period, for example, 1 year or whatever it makes sense, it can be converted into cooperative capital. And therefore, actually, these lenders become members of the cooperative by conversion. So that's actually one thing that we have tried once, and it has worked well. Not for an energy project, but for an increase on a cooperative for well-being. At the same time, a lot of our clients have looked at our loans as bridge money. So in the sense that between the pre-installation and then when the system is set it up and working well, so lower maturity, let's say 4 years, they can use us to gain quicker and although slightly more expensive money. But then when another uptaker of the loan can come up, like an institutional partner that will offer longer years, and we can talk about 20 or 30 years if we're discussing longer maturities, then we basically are a part of the solution and not the full solution as a whole, while at the same time engaging the community and generating all this PR. So these were aspects that I was also thinking about that are relevant. Yes.
Absolutely. Cilou, and then we'll go to Louise to close. Cilou, you wanted to react?
I just wanted to mention that combining all these different instruments and helping energy communities to make the right decisions also helps lower the threshold to get members on board. The Aurore mentioned the combination of having shares, but also member loans. This is a tool that we see a lot happening in projects to make the threshold a lot lower for people to join the membership. So you have a very low fee to become a member or investment threshold. And then if you have more money, then you give it in a shape of a loan with a very low interest. So it's, like she said, almost equity, but not quite. But also using the instruments like GoParity, like bank loans, and combining them in a right way, depending on interests, on conditions, on how long you need, on how many, on the type of members you have, you can really make the project accessible for anyone with a lower income or any kind of situation where they might not have as much money accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And just to close off, by the way, Louise, I wanted to ask, so you mentioned the fact that ELENA is part of an ecosystem of tools that the EIB is currently putting together. What other things do we need to look at from your point of view that are coming at different stages of the process? You mentioned some of them, but I'm curious to know from your point of view, what is the interaction? Is it that you see, a kind of a pipeline of financing that is being built by the EIB, or is it just, programs that are dedicated to specific barriers of projects on the ground?
Well, I mean, there's lots of different things happening in the bank, so I'm very much on the technical assistance side, trying to get what the bank would consider small projects off the ground. Energy communities is another level again. So it's more the fact that the bank can, on the lending side, support all of these types of projects. The lending is more interested in larger ones, to put it frankly. So I think the better way of getting projects like this financed would be through some intermediated structure on the ground. What we try to do is, if we try to be open to everybody, if we see you have some potential that's not for ELENA, we put you to our advisory colleagues and say, well, look, maybe you need to develop your portfolio more, maybe the stakeholders here need a bit more advice, and that can help you get some technical assistance that's not necessarily having to be linked to investment at this moment. And that can be very, very helpful to get things off the ground, because you have to start somewhere. And sorry, Teams call coming in. You have to start somewhere, and so this is also something that can be useful. Or if we see another program run by the Commission, or there's other even national programs, we also look at you to say, well, nationally, do you have something here that can help you develop this contract, this law, this stakeholder, etc. So it's very hard to pinpoint one exact thing, but I would just, because I know we're over time, just say that it's always good to even know something like ELENA exists. That's the first step. A lot of the time there's so many EU programs around, it's impossible to know them all. And then once you have that in your head, it's free to talk to us. You see if there's something that can be done. We do have some energy communities as a very small part of ELENA currently, but it would be really, really great to get something off the ground that would be a little bit, more aggregated. You can see all the wonderful things that are happening here with individual projects on the ground. So I would just say, yeah, come talk to us.
Fantastic. And with this, we will close the session, slightly delayed. Apologies for that. But thank you to all our speakers for sharing your experience and knowledge. What a great event it was. So many things were learned today. So thank you once again. If you want to see the presentations and the recording, they will be available on the Energy Communities repository. And with this, I'll pass on back to Miriam for the final closing.
Thank you so much, Stan, and thank you so much to the speakers. It's been really interesting to hear from all of you, and also to the audience for your questions. I'm sure there's many more questions, so don't hesitate to get in touch with the speakers indeed. Also, make sure to get in touch with the speakers if you have questions. Look at tools that are available. I know that these organizations and more that are out there that work on financing and investments around energy communities have a lot of really valuable resources that can help you throughout the journey. So make sure to take a peek there. And also, many of you may already be aware, but next year at some point, the European Commission will also launch an energy communities facility, where there will be direct financing available for energy communities to develop their business plans. So this is also an important element to keep your eye on for next year, so that you know that there are things coming up. Aurore, I see you have your hand up.
Just a quick remark, because we're working a lot on the financing tool available to communities and the barriers to cooperatives. Sorry, in the ACE projects, I'll share. We're writing a bunch of guides to support communities and cooperatives right now. So I'll share the links that might be interesting to the audience.
Perfect, indeed. We'll share all the materials that the experts share, and you can also find more on the toolbox of the repository. So yeah, have a look out for the materials. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.